Hi guys, as all of you should know by now, Plants vs Zombies Battle for Neighborville Complete Edition has finally released on the Nintendo Switch. Last night I played the game for the first time during a live stream, and so today I just wanted to go through my initial impressions and discuss whether I think it's finally time to purchase Battle for Neighborville. I've got a full review of the game in the works, but I just wanted to share my first thoughts with you guys. As someone who's played the game on all platforms, I'd like to say because of the changes made to the game for the Nintendo Switch version, I already think this is by far the superior version and what I think the game should have looked like on launch day. The absence of microtransactions, the ability to play the game offline and on the go, as well as being able to choose prizes from any prize map at any time are huge and very positive changes in my eyes, and I think they've actually redeemed the game somewhat, but not completely. Let's not get carried away here. The only real main drawback, as you'd expect, is the performance, which I will discuss in more detail in a second. However, I feel the game is more than playable at the lower frame rate, and for me the new additions to the game more than make up for the drop in graphic fidelity. Now, when you first load up the game, you are greeted with a cutscene to introduce you to Neighborville, and I'm going to be honest, I was pretty concerned. For some reason, all the cutscenes in the Switch version are really poor when it comes to frame rate. Like, I think it must get like between 10 to 15 frames tops. In my personal opinion, if there was something they needed to make sure was smooth and optimized, it was the opening cinematic, as this is the first real interaction the player has with the game. The other thing I wanted to mention on the initial startup is that with BFN being an EA game, you have to log in with your EA Origin account, which just kind of makes jumping into the game a little long-winded. Whilst for me it was fine, being a PC player I already had an Origin account, but for many pure Nintendo players it's probably the opposite. Moving on to the gameplay performance, in a recent interview the producer over at PopCat Vancouver, Melvin Teo, said the game would run at a steady 30 FPS, but sadly I can say with complete confidence that this is not true. There were actually very few times where the game reached 30 FPS, like I didn't get any exact numbers, but you can just feel when a game isn't hitting 30. I think the menus and stuff reach 30, but during general gameplay I'd say it varies between 17 and 26 depending on the situation. But I will say you do get used to it and it doesn't make the game unplayable. I did just find sometimes it made aiming a little tricky, but I think if you're someone who uses motion controls, I think that probably helps to combat the issue more so than with a controller. As for the graphics, in handheld mode, I gotta say the game looks pretty damn good. It looks great in fact, and definitely exceeded my expectations. When you're playing with the Switch docked though, you can clearly see it's much lower quality than the other platforms, but again, still better than what I was expecting. So I'm just going to backtrack a little to motion controls. I have to say they've done a great job implementing this, and there are quite a lot of customization options in the settings that allow you to adjust to your needs. I personally haven't used motion controls very much yet, but I will test them out more for the full review. Nevertheless, it's a great addition, especially for native Nintendo players. Now let's move on to some of the key changes I mentioned at the start of the video. The biggest one of which is the removal of microtransactions, which we all thought was an impossible feat for EA. I can't tell you how great it was to go into Rux's store and see these awesome costumes, legendary upgrades and characters all purchasable with in-game currency. You're now rewarded for hard work, not how much is in your wallet. A couple of things I also want to highlight here is that the legendary upgrades only cost 60,000 coins each, which to me is a bit too cheap. Like, I bought 2 legendary upgrades in less than an hour and a half, and because we know how OP most of them are, I feel like maybe these should have cost like 200,000 or something. The next thing is that the Rewardatron now only costs 15,000 instead of 30, so you can empty that twice as fast, which is great. More rewards, more player satisfaction. You can also use the XP machine an unlimited amount of times. You're not restricted to just like 5 goes per day. Finally, you can also collect an unlimited amount, well, 999 prize bulbs. You are no longer restricted to only 50 at a time. Speaking of prize bulbs, let's talk about the prize map, which now allows you to switch to any festival at any time, which opens up tons and tons of rewards to the player from the get-go. Especially for new players, the amount of rewards is quite overwhelming now, and I think it helps the game to feel like it has more content in it. The only thing I don't like here is that it's not great in terms of being able to see which rewards are in which prize map without going into them and scrolling through. I understand it was much quicker this way for the developers, but a restructured prize map user interface would have gone a long way personally. The final thing I would like to touch on is offline play. Like, this is something many of the community have wanted for a long time. I know there are a lot of people out there who don't have Switch Online, so this is huge. And the fact that this is a PvZ shooter, like, we've never in the history of Plants vs Zombies been able to take a shooter game on the go before. Overall, if you didn't already guess, I do think this is the right time to buy Battle for Neighborville, but only for Switch. Like, I mean, if you haven't purchased it on a different platform by now, the only incentives that may sway you are these new improvements, which I have to say are great. If you don't already have a Switch though, I wouldn't recommend getting one just to play Battle for Neighborville. There's also a lot of new players and new interest as well, which always helps, but I'm not sure how long this will last. You've also got to remember there is no new content coming to the game, so again, that's something to consider. In terms of cost, the game is cheap for a Nintendo Switch game. It's cheaper than it was on the original 2019 launch, but still not as cheap as the Founders Edition. However, the amount of money you will save as there's no microtransactions is quite considerable in my mind. If you're still not sure this is the right time to buy it, or if you already have BFN on another platform and don't want to pay for the game again, which is understandable, I guess you could wait for a sale, but I mean, if the new editions haven't already swung you to purchase, I don't think anything will. A lot of the community have had huge issues with Battle for Neighborville throughout its lifetime, so even with all the positive changes, I'm not sure if this will change people's opinions on the game. The very last thing to say is if you are someone that is really bothered by poor performance and not getting a consistent 30 FPS, I would perhaps say hold fire a couple of weeks to see if we do get any optimization patches. Anyway guys, that's about it for today's video. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. Do you think now is the right time to buy BFN? As always, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and if you do want to support the channel further, check out my Patreon page by clicking on screen now or through the link in the description. But other than that, I shall see you in the next one. Okay, thanks guys. Bye. Bye.